Grüß Gott, ich freue mich sehr, Sie heute Abend hier begrüßen zu dürfen an einem Abend, an dem Spanien gegen Italien spielt und es sehr heiß ist. Und ich bin dankbar, dass Sie alle gekommen sind. Aber natürlich sind Sie gekommen, um Grigori Chataschvili zu sehen und zu hören, der als Boris Akunin sehr viel berühmter ist, aber, ich darf das unterstellen, möglicherweise nicht unbedingt so genannt werden will. I'm going to switch to English now, because English is better. Russian is possible, but my Russian is worse than your perfect English, so we're going to talk in English. Thank you very much for coming. I usually don't have guests about whom I worry when they travel here. Guests come and then they're here. In your case, I was slightly worried whether you might arrive, because as you mentioned, Austria's government has a sort of Putin-Versteher reputation, and you are on the Russian wanted list. What was it that could have happened in the worst case?
Not much, I think. I could have been stopped at passport control, maybe, because it happens sometimes. I'm supposedly on the internet search list, and Russian government has been very active in trying to use its treaties for extradition with different countries in a ministry level. So it could mean sort of annoyance, not much more than that, I think.
Okay. For those who, I don't think anybody is here who does not know who Boris Akunin or Grigori Chataschvili is. For those who don't, or accidentally ran in here because the door was open, I'm just going to mention a few things, and you will correct me because your life has been very, I don't know, moved, and there's lots of things that have happened. So if I make mistakes, please correct me. You were born in Georgia, but only lived there 1 month, and only were once back in 2016, right?
Twice already.
Twice.
I went there last year too.
Oh, okay, interesting, good. That helps because we're going to talk about Georgia quickly too later. You were Russian. You're British since 2020. You have a British passport, and you wrote how many Erast Van Doren crime stories, which is the famous of your heroes?
It is a series of 16 books.
Okay, 16. Then you wrote 16, yeah. And you stopped writing about Van Doren, which is, everybody loves Van Doren. I think the Russian readers were fans of Van Doren since 1898. That's when you started?
The last one went out in 2018.
Okay, and then I actually am a fan of your little quirky feminist nun, Pelagia. She's another of your heroes. And then you wrote lots of novels about lots of other heroes, amongst whom would Russians know most or best besides Pelagia and Van Doren?
Probably the best known series now is My History of Russian State.
Is that so?
Yeah, because this is what I have been working on for the past 11 or 12 years.
Okay.
It's basically a combination of fiction and non-fiction. It is a series of volumes about Russian history from the very beginning, 10 volumes so far, and each volume is accompanied by a volume of fiction about this epoch. So the idea was to make a reader interested in the epoch by reading an adventure story, and then hopefully this person would go to the bookshop and buy the thick, boring, non-fiction volume and read it. And it worked.
And it worked. I have to admit, because when I prepared for this talk, I tried to find out on Western media, in the internet, about that series, the history series, that I call them twin books, the novels and the history books. And it's quite difficult. Russians know everything because they can see it on the internet, they read Russian, and they can read chapters of it. In the West, you don't know much about it. We're going to talk about that later because I want to start with your current situation. Because you're not only the only guest who ever was worried whether you come, but you're also maybe my only guest who is a criminal when it comes to the Russian state.
Not
right?
yet. Not yet. I'm under investigation.
Okay.
I'm wanted, but I have not been tried yet. Yeah, so this is a big suspense.
There's a big suspense. Will you tell us? I mean, the whole story is very complicated. There's a warrant that has been issued in December 23, if I'm right, and your books have been banned, and your plays are not played anymore, and the posters for your plays have been taken down. There was a raid in one of your publishing houses. Then you were called a foreign agent, and now you're on the wanted list. And as far as I know, there is supposedly a trial, or will be a trial, or has not been yet.
I don't follow.
You don't follow?
I said that I'm not interested in what they do. I'm also on the terrorist and extremist list. Yes. I'm sorry. That was sort of flattering.
Okay, so I'm not sure whether I got the chronology right, but you don't follow any of that? I mean, you know about it, you know that your books have been banned, you know that you cannot be read in Russia anymore, so I don't really believe that you're not interested in that.
I am interested very much in what's happening in Russia, but I am not interested in criminal proceedings. I'm not going to take part in the trial. When it happens, no lawyer will represent me, because I do not want to imitate a legal process in a country where there is where there are no real courts. So they can do whatever they like. I'm not participating in whatever capacity. No.
I know this is a hypothetical question, but because we both assume that this will never happen. But when I look at all the trials that are happening, those fake trials in Russia against dissidents, whose only chance is to use their one speech at the end of the trial to talk to the Russian people, say goodbye, say what happened, and then go. That is something that I haven't seen in any other country for a while.
This is the only and the last genre of free, uncensored speech, yes, which now exists in Russia. This last speech thing. The publisher, which now publishes my books outside Russia, because they cannot be published in Russia any longer, has recently promoted and launched a book which consists of lost speeches, and it is powerful reading.
Yes, I advise you to get it. It's amazing. Yeah, it's very depressing too.
There is another project that I did recently. I sent out a sort of questionnaire to Russian celebrities, 13 questions. Just, like they did in Victorian era. But not about what's your favorite color, but what do you believe in? What makes you happy? What makes you unhappy? What's your idea of today's Russia? That sort of things.
What kind of celebrities?
Writers, actors, famous musicians, famous, I don't know, journalists. The answers were very interesting, but then I got a letter from Russia, from a group of volunteers who help political prisoners. They are, of course, underground. And they asked me to write a letter that they would send to political prisoners in Russia just to support them.
Okay.
I said, I have a better idea. I shall send my questionnaire the same to them so that they can answer, and then we shall publish it as a book. And the first book with celebs will be a promotion for the second volume. And of course, most of the questions didn't pass the jail censorship. Yeah. But still, we got more than 70 answers, and Alexei Navalny was one of them. It was, I think, his last publication. So we published this questionnaire with answers, with short biographic note on each, about each of the prisoners, and which was the most important thing, with the address, where to write to them. Great. Because so these people, they must not feel isolated and forgotten. And of course, all the proceedings, all the money which was received for this book went to a fund which supports political prisoners in Russia.
Great, good, thank you. In February 22, you were very outspoken. You already lived in London. You had been outspoken against the annexation of Crimea. You had been outspoken against the war in Donbass. But this was something else. And you put something on Facebook. Russia is ruled by a psychologically deranged dictator, and worst of all, is obediently follows his paranoia. That's an unusually strong reaction for a Russian writer.
There are a lot of, look, all my friends, Russian writers, speak and write like this. This is totally normal. I don't know anyone else. I don't have any other friends who think or speak otherwise among Russians. This is totally normal. There was nothing, I don't know, very brave or very outstanding about this. This was a very normal reaction. All of us reacted like that.
But the thing that really got you into trouble, tell me if I'm mistaken, was that crazy prank call, which you say it's not a prank call, it's a KGB action. Someone who called you and said he was Ukrainian, and you went out in the open and said the war against Ukraine sucks. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So my biggest concern and the source of my sadness was that Ukraine and Ukrainians were not using the democratic Russians to help them. They did not want to do anything together with us, although we could support them significantly. So when I had a call from this guy who was Minister of Culture of Ukraine, as I thought, it was very well done. It was a video call. It was incredibly convincing deep fake. Because before that, I had to look at the guy, how he looks, how he speaks, and it was him. So the way they can do it now, it's really incredible. So, and he came up with the idea that let's do something together. Mutual concerts, Russian and Ukrainian writers speaking together. I thought it was a great idea. So they caught me completely. I said, okay, I'm willing to do anything for it. Then he said, he'll let me call you again. I'll speak to the president. Then he called again and said, you'd be surprised, but the president is on the line. He wants to talk to you, President Zelensky. Well, I was not very much surprised because I had spoken to Vladimir Zelensky once before, because he used to be an actor. He wanted to play Erast von Doren, who is a character. He even played Erast von Doren in a sketch, so it was not just something I couldn't believe. Then I spoke to Vladimir Zelensky. I thought so. And because it was not a public talk, I told him everything that I thought Ukrainian government was doing wrong. I said, you're doing wrong this and that, like an idiot. And then, of course, they cut out everything that they didn't need in it. They
put the rest together.
They glued it together.
And bam, there you were. Now you're a foreign agent and an enemy of the people.
Yep.
And you're completely censored. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I want to quote something which I found very impressive. You said about, taking your books out of the shelves in libraries that cannot be gotten out anymore, you cannot buy them anymore. This is a seemingly minor event, censoring you. The banning of books, the declaration of some writer as a terrorist is actually an important milestone. Books have not been banned in Russia since Soviet times. Writers have not been accused of terrorism since the Great Terror. We're talking about Stalin era. So since then, books have been censored. I mean, samizdat existed because they were censored, but not in that extent and not with that terror accompanying it, or what do I not get?
It's not exactly what I said. I said that writers have not been proclaimed terrorists since Stalin era, which is true.
Okay.
There were writers during Brezhnev era who were imprisoned, but not for terrorism, for anti-Soviet propaganda.
Okay.
This is a huge mistake. There is a huge difference between propaganda and terrorism. So that was something they started to, and I was just, they continued after me, of course, and it's not going to stop.
They continued after you, and there's only very few people now who speak openly, obviously, because most of them emigrated, right?
There aren't only Russians on this list. This is actually a very interesting reading, this list. You can find there, I don't know, the Prime Minister of Estonia, an American senator, the press secretary of Facebook, what is it called now? So it's basically their hate list. They put there everyone they do not like.
Yeah. So it's an honor, in a way.
Well, sort.
Depends.
Sort.
You also found, you were talking about the fact that you think that the Ukrainians are doing a lot wrong because they do not try to unify with the Russian opposition in order to form a community of Putin opponents, right? And then you founded a platform, I don't know, I didn't find very much about that, True Russia, which gathers Russian cultural figures to help Ukrainian refugees and Russians who fled their country. What kind of a platform is that?
It was just this emotional period, I think maybe a week after the big war started. And the three of us, me and two my friends, and another one is Sergei Guriev, a prominent economist who has now become the dean of London Business School, and Mikhail Baryshnikov, the choreographer. So we founded this initiative because people were fleeing from Ukraine and their situation was desperate, and they were already running in millions. And they needed well, we needed to do something, and we decided to collect money among Russian diaspora.
Collect, let me get that right. Money from the Russian diaspora for Ukrainian refugees.
For Ukrainian refugees.
Okay.
For Ukrainian refugees, and the situation was really hard for lots of them. So we did some events, people were donating, and we still didn't have the, the legal, I don't know, what is it called?
The legal form.
A legal form, so we're just passing all the money to British
charity or something.
Red Cross or whatever, so that they would distribute it. So it worked, it was like that.
But to be honest, I mean, I've been to Georgia lately, and I've met lots of Russians who have less money and don't know what to do and where to go at the moment, in Georgia especially, more actually than, for example, my Ukrainian friends in Germany. So are you helping Russian refugees now too?
I know that a lot of Russians are in a very bad situation, people who escaped from Russia, leaving everything behind, but still, if you compare their situation to the situation of Ukrainians,
okay,
it is incomparable. Ukrainians, this is, well, a bad situation, and with Ukrainians it's tragedy. So the priority was, of course, to help Ukrainians, and as for Russians, we were connecting volunteers who wanted to help with those who were in need of help.
Okay, okay.
So, and Russians have been organizing in different countries and helping each other.
Okay. You will find that a bit odd, but I would like to change to the author, Boris Akunin, for just a bit, because some of you are probably here because you love to read his books. And we're going to move from the author, Boris Akunin, to the author, Grigory Khatishvili, to the historian, to the political mind, and then back to current Russia. Okay, so don't think I'm getting lost. I just want to understand a bit more about who you are and what you do. I introduced you in the beginning very quickly in German, and I said you don't really like to be called Boris Akunin, although you used to be the writer Boris Akunin, because when I write to you, you write back with not with your pen name, but with your real name. And you said in a few of your interviews that Boris Akunin is actually a writer of entertainment novels, and that's not your favorite form.
I have other pseudonyms as well.
I know. How many do you have?
Two more.
Oh, two more.
One is feminine. I wrote 3 novels pretending to be a woman writer. It was fun. And I have yet another pseudonym, Anatoly Brusnikin, who I decided to write novels as someone who has political views quite different from mine. Very Russian, nationalist, patriot, that sort of writer.
Why do you do that?
I thought that it would be fun, and besides, I thought that there can be a sort of, attractive nationalism. an attractive patriotism.
Did you find that to be true?
Not, the xenophobic one, where you dislike and hate everyone who does not belong to your nation, but just a writer who loves his nation. He loves everybody else as well, but he just loves everything Russian, all these dances, piroshki, whatever. So I wrote 3 novels as this kind Russian nationalist Anatoly Brusnikin.
And then you found out that it doesn't work. Oh, it's not you.
The first one sold 700,000 copies.
Jesus.
Yeah. It was one of the games I was planning.
You're playing games, and you once said that Boris Akunin was not a real writer. I'm quoting you.
Boris Akunin has been writing since 1997. Mm-hmm. So he has changed a lot. Mm-hmm. He became a writer. He grew old. He became quite boring. With age. So he has changed.
Is that why, after Not Saying Goodbye, which I finished last night and I liked a lot, there's not a new one? And you said, there's not going to be another Eras van Doren because he ran out of words for him.
Yes. The problem when you write fiction is not plots or ideas. I have a huge file with plots, and I'm never going to write all of them. The problem is words. You run out of words, just words. So, the words, they lose, resistance. They lose elasticity. You've used all these metaphors or anything before. It doesn't sound like mantra, your text. It's not right. So that's why I change genres all the time, and that's why I change pseudonyms. Because when you take a new pseudonym, you become someone else, and you write differently.
What are the books then that you put your heart in? I mean, that's a real writer, the real Grigory Khatishvili writes with his heart and his soul and his mind what?
I have a series of fiction, which is serious fiction, 6 novels already. It is called Family Album.
Yeah.
Family Album, it's like, all of us, we have an album with family photographs, old photographs with people who are long gone. I love family photo albums. When I come to somebody's place, I always ask for album, and I start asking, who is this, and what happened to that guy, and why does this woman look sad, and that's all. I especially love, the photographs with graduates from a school, old photographs. I look at all those faces, people who had to live through 20th century, especially if it is from some problematic country, and I try to figure out what happened to you, to you, to you, to you, to you. It's that sort of thing. So this series of novels, Family Album, each chapter is a photograph, an old photograph, and it is a story of a family, a Russian family, which lives through 20th century. So the first novel was taking place during the Revolution and Second War, the Civil War, the second in the 20s, then in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s. So I published 6 so far, and it is not easy reading at all, because the 20th century was not easy living. So sometimes it becomes sort of philosophical essay. And when I wrote it, I did not care whether people are going to love it or even read it. So there is this difference between what we call in Russian serious literature and belletristika,
okay,
which is basically entertainment fiction, which I have been writing all the time. So serious literature is a very impolite genre.
Because it
entertainment fiction should be very polite, because it's like you are talking to a hall full of people and you need to entertain them. This is your duty. When you write a serious novel, you don't care. You write it because there is a problem which troubles you. You need to find a solution, and you do whatever is needed. So if it is very long-winded, you don't care. You need it, you write it. So I have written already 6 novels like that.
You were mentioning that history series, the 10 volumes, you know, the twins with the novels. You were telling me on the way here that each of them, again, covers a century, right?
Depends.
Almost, it depends, okay.
Depends.
But what you do there is also you follow families and the ancestors and the descendants.
In the fictional part.
So, but those are not, this is, again, not the genre that you mean, because that's, again,
No,
entertainment?
This is entertainment, yeah.
Okay.
It's
kind of complicated.
Cloak and dagger, that sort of thing.
Okay. So why do you even write them still? I mean, why do you still write this cloth and dagger things?
I won't.
If you don't?
I won't.
Oh.
I stopped. So I am retired from the big book market in Russia. I don't need to play by book market rules. I'm free. So since they banned me in Russia and arrested all the books, and I'm not published there in hundreds, thousands of copies, 35 million copies sold so far, and it's done, it's finished,
it's unbelievable. 35 million copies. Who sells that much? It's unbelievable.
And now I'm relieved, in a way, because I feel free. I know right from the beginning of this year, like a machine gun, and I write differently. I like what I like. I write what I like. I have my publishing house. I have my audience of readers. It's not big, but they are people who are like me because they did not want to live in Russia and they left. And many of them would be interested in what I write anyway.
So thank you, Putin, we could say, because you're relieved and free.
Well, actually, it's not about Putin, it's about life.
I'm kidding.
No matter
I'm
what bad thing happens to you, in a way, after a while, you understand that it was not well.
But nevertheless, you, for example, at the moment you're here to research a new book. You are an extremely intense researcher. I read once that, in order to write a book with a guy who wants to write about Dostoevsky, you had someone in Petersburg rewrite the handwriting of Dostoevsky and draw Dostoevsky's drawings on old paper in order to imagine how Dostoevsky might have been working. I mean, that sounds kind of, Jesus, takes a lot of time. It sounds a bit crazy. So you really dive into those things. I mean, how do you research and when do you have time to write all that?
Research is the most interesting and pleasant part of my work. I cannot even call what I do work. It's not work. Work is something you do from 9 till 5 and take day off. I do not have weekends. I don't have vacations. All my life is vacation and weekend, so I don't need to. When I get tired, and you do tired writing a book, I always write 3 books simultaneously, because I live in 3 countries. So in each country there would be a manuscript on the table. So when I feel that I'm starting to get tired with this book, I just take my laptop.
That's why you travel so much.
Yeah, so I always move within this triangle. I always write 3 books. They are all different. And when you return to the previous book, it's always a relief. It's cool. you get a boost of energy. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a good life principle.
And research is you're like a hunter.
Okay. You said, but obviously it's not true anymore, I want to quote it nevertheless, that you didn't want to write any history book that goes past 1917. Van Doren, the last Van Doren, ends in 1718. Now you said that changed. Why? Because of Putin's war against Ukraine, or because you decided, what the heck, I might as well write about Stalin now?
I thought I'd stop with volume 9 in 1917. Because my history, the history that I write, it is very un-Russian in this way. It is unemotional. Russians are always emotional when they write about their history. There would always be good guys and bad guys and who was right and who was wrong. I was not interested in that. I was interested in understanding what really happened, what lessons can be learned from it, and why has the country come to this point I was interested in. I needed to understand it because I did not understand my own country. I did not understand why the hell was it going back to totalitarianism. I didn't get it. I was there in Moscow in 2011, 2012 with all those people who wanted change. And then I saw the situation just slipping away. And then, well, all this happened that I thought that although I majored in history at the university, I do not know history, I do not understand it. I know the facts, but I don't know whys. So I needed to understand it. So just returning to your question. So I wanted to stop in 1917 because I thought I wouldn't be able to write the history of 20th century unemotionally. This was already something which was happening to my family, to my parents, to my grandparents. I thought I wouldn't manage it. But then I found a solution. It's very simple. I thought that I must imagine that I was writing not the history of the country which did bad things to my family, but I was writing a history of Babylon or Assyria. I would still be at a distance.
How do you do that? I mean, you can decide you want to do that, but how do you do it? You cannot keep out your emotions.
Oh, I'm a real Terminator. Yeah, I can't program myself. I can. So the hardest part was being, unemotional, writing about Stalin. But I think I managed that because I do hate this guy, but I hope that this does not show in my book.
But what I don't get, you said Russians get emotional when they talk about history. But at the moment, history is not emotional, it's ideological. Is that the same in a way? When you look from Russian eyes, you said Russians look at history emotionally. Putin uses history at the moment as an ideological weapon. And he evokes emotions. So does he work with the emotional way of looking at history as his own weapon?
Yeah, what Putin is trying to do has a long-standing tradition in Russia, and I don't think it's going to work. Like it didn't work to me when I majored in history in the Soviet university. I didn't believe a word of what they taught me because it was so boring. No, all those Putin's history textbooks for schools, kids are going to hate them. This is not how a textbook for kids should be written.
Well, I assume they're not for reading, they're for going to war.
No, they are first for making money on this, then they are for Putin to read them and approve them. This is the logic of Putin's system. Everything they do is just to please someone who is on the top. This is the only logic. All the rest is irrelevance. So if they do something which seems absurd or stupid to us from the outside, it's neither stupid nor absurd. It's just another logic. It's their logic. The logic of this vertical system is just always to please the one who is on top of you. The rest is irrelevant. It's totally shameless. They don't care what you think about it. They just centered, focused on this. That's how they rise up. Okay.
You're not that unemotional sometimes, obviously, but you weren't because you got into politics quite often because you were angry. For example, in 2005, you wrote your first open letter.
Did I?
Yes, you did, obviously, about the opposition that should unite against Putin with Chubais and Yavlinsky. That's what I read. Is not true? You forgot?
No, I think the first time I got emotional was before that. Okay. It was probably the year was 2000 when they were closing the independent television and TV. I think it was the first time. I didn't want to do it. I always wanted to be just a writer, to write bestsellers. That's all I wanted to be. But Russia is a country where you want to have fun, but after a while you find yourself in an impossible situation because you have to do something or you lose respect for yourself. Yeah, this is an impossible situation.
But isn't that true for every police state, for every dictatorship? Is
Probably,
that special?
Yes, I think so, yes. I think so, yeah, but it's just because I know Russian experience so well. So what I've never been a political activist or something. I never wanted to go into politics. I just wanted, I didn't really have a choice. You think I wanted to lose my Russian readership?
I don't assume so.
Oh, no, I didn't. But it was not an option.
2012, that's what you're most famous for as an activist, Bolotnaya protests after the faked elections, parliamentary elections, and then the Putin presidential elections. And people, you know, 100,000 went on the street. There was even maybe a slight chance for something to change. And then obviously nothing changed again. And you were out in the streets and you said I was only helping, but in fact you were one of the speakers. I mean, you were really active. You were important then. You tried to make a difference.
Speaking is not acting. Speaking is all I did. So there were others who really were acting. Alexei Navalny, obviously, was one of them. And they paid for this with their lives, with their freedom. There are now over 1,000 political prisoners in Russia. Well, those people, they are really fighting.
You were more optimistic then. You said there's going to be a better generation.
I was mistaken. I understood it. I understand it now very well. I had to write 10 volumes of Russian history to understand it. Now I understand very well that it was mission impossible in 2012 because I did not understand the nature, the structure of Russian state as clearly as I understand, or as I think I understand it now. Russian state is built in a way which doesn't leave any space for democracy. No, because this huge country consisting of different parts which are so much unlike each other can be held together only by two methods, either dictatorship or the country has to become a real federation or even confederation, where each part of the country decides how it wants to live by itself. And they are united together, if they want to, by huge national projects or whatever, because they want to stay together. The second way was never tried in Russia, never. So if Russia stayed the kind of country it is, and Democrats came to power, the history would have repeated itself, like after 1991. After a while, a new president or whatever, a Democrat like Yeltsin, would have to shoot at his parliament, then to fight separatists, then to recreate KGB, then to do everything that Putin did step by step. Otherwise, the country would fall apart and there would be a civil war in a country which has a lot of nuclear missiles, nuclear plants, and all that, and this is really frightening. So the only way to make Russia a country, a free country, working democratically is to rebuild it completely, to rebuild it into a real federation, to, we call it to, how to say it, de-Moscowize it.
Decentralize in a way, yeah.
De-Moscowize it, yeah.
But it sounds like the only thing necessary would be an organizational reform, and then the rest would follow. But you know, the minds, transgenerational experiences, the traumas, it's going to take maybe hundreds of years to evaporate.
No, I'm very optimistic about human minds. This is already in my field. I believe that people are like frogs, basically. So they take the same temperature as the water they're swimming in.
And when you cool it down?
Yeah, I saw it happen in 1980s during perestroika. Like in 1986, everyone was just the Soviet people believing in communism, hating everything foreign. Then a couple of years later, nobody wanted communists, everybody wanted to be free, and it happened very quickly. Look at Ukraine. Ukraine was also Soviet people in 1991. Now, 30 years later, it's another nation with another mentality. People are like that. They change, they adjust. If the situation becomes worse, people become worse. If it becomes better, they become better.
So it's like a bad dream. Putinism is a bad dream, and once you awake in a federalist
it's
state...
bad reality. It's not bad dream, and I understand now that it was inevitable, what happened to Russia. As long as Russia stays an empire, it has no other way but to act like this. So this has to change at some point. Russia has to become sort of, I don't know, United States of Eurasia.
Following that logic, Putin, you could say, I'm exaggerating obviously, but you could say that Putin is like a victim of the Russian structure, a state structure, and a victim of that centralized KGB state, because all that he is, you know, this completely detached from reality, not seeing what's happening in Ukraine, destroying a positive future for his country, is only fate that had to happen because Russia is Russia?
Victim is someone who didn't have a choice. It was Putin's choice. Putin was not always like this. If you watch his interviews from 1990s, you'd see a man of democratic opinions completely. But he decided to take this course. He kept his power. He was willing to pay the price he paid for it. So he's not a victim, he's the culprit. But I understand also that if it had been someone else, it would have been the same. Any democratic president in Russia of 1990s had this choice.
Would have ended up like
either that. You stop being a Democrat or you stop being a president.
And that, combined with the reason that you said it's a vertical structure of order and follows, that is the reason why nobody stopped him. For example, with the war in Ukraine.
No, there were a lot of other reasons, and this is where we need to talk about collective responsibility, definitely, on different level, of course. There were, of course, the greedy oligarchs and billionaires, which went along with him just for their profits. This is true. And there were us, people who didn't want to meddle with politics, like myself, who wanted to have fun, to write bestsellers, to be successful in your profession. There is, with my generation, there is just another thing, because we grew up in the Soviet system, we have this deeply set hatred for everything collectivistic. You do not want to be a part of anything. You want to be by yourself. We are all individualists. And in order to achieve something for a country, you need to get together. And we missed this chance, because when we started to, these convulsive motions in 2011, 12, it was too late.
Is that one of the reasons why you didn't go back after 2014? Because you didn't want to get involved into Russian politics anymore?
Oh no, I left Russia in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea in protest, not so much about the Putin, I had no illusions about Putin, but about this general euphoria around me. It was true that the majority of Russians were rejoicing in 2014.
And you couldn't stand it?
I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it. I wanted to leave. Then I came a couple of months later to Russia to a book fair to have a look what's happening. And they made it clear to me that if I come again, I'll be arrested.
Okay.
So I never came back.
Now he is in North Korea. No, he was in North Korea. I think he's in Vietnam now, Putin. And you see those surreal pictures in a surreal country with a surreal friendship. And it looks pitiful in a way, don't you think?
I think it looks terrifying because when I see people in North Korea, I never laugh. I feel terrified for human beings of what can be done to them. And of course, I have this fear for Russia's future because the country is moving basically in the same direction. And I remember how Moscow was the most interesting place on earth.
It was wild and crazy.
Vigorous, a lot of talent just blooming. And there was another reason I didn't want to go to Russia after 2014. I did not want to see my country so humiliated by dictatorship. It just didn't want. There was nothing I could do about it except writing books.
Yeah, sorry. As a journalist, I feel you. You said not long ago, Putin is a desperate man with power, and therefore a wild card. That sounds that you're. What are your worst fears? When
Nuclear war, evidently.
Although everybody in the West tells you it's not going to happen.
We all thought that, February 2022 was not going to happen, but it did. I didn't believe it would happen.
Okay.
A dictator who lives in a totally delusional world is a thing in itself. The things he can do, you with your logic, you cannot even imagine it.
And yet, you think there is some optimism left because you say someday Russia will be a normal country again. What's normal then?
Look, if you take Russia today, it's quite a pessimistic side, because although people who actively support Putin are not numerous, the proportion of such people is not great, maybe 10% of the population. The majority is okay with Putin, so they support him passively. They maybe do not like him, but they do nothing, because they are afraid or they don't care or whatever. This is the way it is. But if you look at it from my angle, it looks very differently. And my angle is a writer's angle. It's the angle of culture. If you look at Russian culture, the situation would be very much different, because the majority of important big names in Russian culture are against war, against Putin, against dictatorship. If you take writers, almost all of them, the big names who make Russian literature, are on this side. And if some of them stay in Russia, they do not participate in it. They do not support it. The same goes for all top journalists, YouTubers, musicians, a lot of talented actors, directors. So if you look at the field of culture, the picture is very different. And a lot of these people apart from doing what they do professionally, they are also sort of public intellectuals. Mm-hmm. They are active in social networks. People listen to them. People look up to them. And you can say that what is culture against the army and the KGB?
Strong factor in Russia.
Strong factor in Russia. Look, you know what the crest of Russia is like. The double-headed eagle, like the Austrian one. Doppelangler?
Doppeladler.
Doppeladler, yeah. And this is exactly how I see Russia. There are two heads and a huge body. The body is the population, who can be turned this way or that way, depending. Two heads are one looking to the west, one looking to the east. And these two heads have been in conflict for 200 years. Yeah. So one head represents the state, the imperialistic tradition, which basically comes from this great Mongol empire from the east.
Slavist ideology, etc. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other head belongs to Europe and wants European values. So, and these two heads have been fighting among themselves for 200 years. Most of the time, of course, the imperialist head was winning, but not always. Not always. Sometimes, yeah, look, remember Perestroika, remember Glasnost. And this fight is going on. And there are fields where this European head is stronger. If we speak about the most important fight for hearts and minds, we are stronger here. And I believe that there is a good chance that we shall win eventually.
Just 2 or 3 more questions, and then I'll hand over to you. Alexei Navalny was your friend.
Friend would be saying too much because we have a long history and we were not always friends.
Okay, there were
times when we were in conflict, yeah.
Okay, that's what most people say about him, but you said he was the image of future Russia. Witty and smart and quick and optimistic, and he will be forgotten, won't he? Because they killed him. You say that he's a hero. I'm afraid that the opposite, that future of Russia is dead with him.
No, absolutely not. Now that they killed him, they cannot do anything to him now. He is untouchable, he's immortal. And he's a symbol, especially for younger people. He became an icon.
Propaganda can do everything. Look at China, where the memory of the Tiananmen Square is completely eradicated. So you just have
Russia is not China. Russia is not China just because Russians are so much less disciplined than Chinese.
Okay. So you do think that that Putin, with his massive propaganda and his massive Prussia and the money for the soldiers and the fear and the trials and the big television screens with propaganda all over the place, and the television shows with people saying let's nuke Paris and London. People are going to turn away from that one day?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that Putin is going to be his own gravedigger, because this man is not a genius. He makes mistakes, big mistakes. So I believe if it hadn't been for the help from the West, he probably would have collapsed by now.
What, you have to explain that? You mean the sanctions, or what do you mean by help with the West?
I mean just general attitude toward Russia and Russians from the West, from the beginning of the war. Because we need to understand this. The only hope to overthrow Putin lies within the Russian people. No one else can end this dictatorship. No Ukrainian army, no matter how heroically it fights, will take Moscow and something like that. No. The only hope stays with Russian people. So every time a dictatorship in Russia collapsed, it was because the country imploded from inside. 1917, 1991, it cannot happen in any other matter. We should have all understood it very clearly from the beginning. So everything that approaches this is good.
So what you're saying is that the West should have supported the Russian people, made a difference between Putin and the people, should have not tried to look at after, the time after the war, how do we make peace again, but support the right side.
I believe that the message should have been, this is a fight for your freedom. We know that Putin is a dictator. We support democratic forces in Russia. And so when Russians started fleeing from Russia in hundreds of thousands because they just wanted to be a part of Putin's war, what they met in the West was very unwelcome. So many of them, they just had to go back to Russia because they had no choice. And each fact of some canceling of Russian culture somewhere, Chekhov, Pushkin, whatever, was used by Putin inside Russia as a propaganda weapon to show to his people, look, everybody in the world, they do not hate just me, they hate you as well, all Russians. So you may not like me, but you have no option. We started this war, we have to end it. You have to unite around me, and it works. And it works, and West has been helping Putin with this. And this makes the moment of revolution, just puts it into an uncertain future. That's what I think.
Okay. I'm going to stop here for a second. Thank you very much. It was fascinating, a bit depressing, and then yet...
very unemotional?
Extremely unemotional, completely. Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to the public because...